Hey, welcome to the show, or the beginnings of the show, the recording before the show begins.
Thanks for
Technically,
joining the stream.
yeah, it's the stream. That's what it is.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, so thank you for joining us. If you have thoughts, comments, anything, you just want to drop it in the chat. We're going to keep an eye out for it, see what we can do, if we can mix it in the show, respond to that. We actually part of being able to do that is actually turning on the stream on my other device, so I can keep an eyeball on it if I can. So I don't think we should wait too long. We should get right into it so we can keep as much of the Instagram folks with us as possible the entire time. So let's go.
Let's take it.
And welcome to the Beer Guys Radio Show. I am Brian Hewitt. Tim Dennis is on assignment right now, so he's not with us. But we've got in his place Mo Mike Nate. How you doing, Mo Mike Nate?
Doing very well, Brian. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. Yeah. We got a lot to talk about this week. We have quite a few stories, in fact. We've got everything from cicada-related stuff to yeast-eating electronics and early onset Oktoberfest outrage, which is neat to get it this early in the year. Seasonal creep. So rage is creeping up into the year, so it's going to be great. Yeah. So let's just get started with something interesting, something recent. Did you do anything interesting over the long weekend? Since this is the first time we've talked since Memorial Day.
I didn't do a whole bunch interesting over the weekend, but I did get a chance to hang out with some family, share some homebrew with my aunt, who actually loved it. I brewed a hazy IPA, and she is a big IPA fan. And not only did she like it, she wanted to have the second bottle I brought. So I gladly gave it to her. And yeah, it was a good time just hanging out with family. How about you, Brian?
Yeah, I did a lot of traveling, but before I get into that, the hazy IPA. Now having brewed one, a lot
Yeah.
of people have been expressing their outrage about the hazy IPA and what they imagine it's done to the industry. Will you brew another hazy IPA? Do you like them, or do you think it was terrible and you'll never do it again?
This is quite possibly the best beer I've ever homebrewed. Now, I did make a mistake. It was supposed to be a pale ale, and I did some I had a kerfuffle with my gravity reading, so I added way too much sugar and wound up with a 7% IPA instead of the 5% pale ale that I was going for. The yeast I used is actually what made it hazy, so it wound up being an okay, like a great first attempt at an IPA, especially a hazy IPA. I don't think I'm going to make it a cornerstone of my homebrewing efforts, but I'm happy with it.
It is a fairly forgiving style, I think. As long as you have haze and you don't overdo it with your hops, your boil edition hops, I think you
Hmm.
can get away with a lot. You just dry hop the heck out of it, and it
Yeah.
should cover a lot of flaws. And having more booze in an IPA this year is kind of a win. I went to in my travels this past weekend, basically. I wound up in Nashville for a short time. That was actually for work, and I was at a place that had six pilsners on
Oh,
tap
wow.
and only five IPAs, and not a single thing on the board was over. I want to say nothing was over 6%. I think it was 6% or less. Everything that they had, no pastry stouts. None of their IPAs were above like 5.5,
Hmm.
5.6, and I
Okay.
enjoyed the heck out of it. That's
Yeah.
Smith and Lentz in Nashville. I've talked about them previously, and I'm a big fan of what they're doing up there. So when I go into town, I usually stop in there and grab some pizza and just go through all of the pilsners.
Hmm.
It's great to see that. It's refreshing, I might say. I
Yeah, no, I
also
definitely need to add that to my rotation for the next time I go to Nashville. That's really refreshing to know that there's a tap room out there. Now, what are the odds that somebody's reviewing them and saying, well, they have got more pilsners than IPAs on their tap wall. I need to see something dark. I need to see something sour. I need to see the more higher gravity stuff. What kind of flack do you think they're getting?
So they get a little bit of it. They've had a few
Okay.
people come in and say things about that. They do have what was it? Did they have a Schwartz beer or something? So they had something darker. They had a was it a porter stout? They had something on the
It's a
lower
dark
end,
lager.
maybe 5.5%. And they pointed out, because I asked almost the same thing you asked, they pointed out that we usually don't have any kind of sour beer at all on it. We have one, and I think it was a collaboration. I don't remember what it was. So they had that. It was like, oh, we have that. I'm like, yeah, I'm not here for that, but that's cool that you do, you know. But even that was on the lower end. I think that was in the 4% range. So all very drinkable. It's harder to get in trouble there, and everything was delicious. And of course, I walked away with. They had, I think they had a bunch of the pilsners to go. They had some of the IPAs. I was pretty much just said, "Hey, can I get a 4 pack of every single pilsner you have in your to go thing?" And I
That's
think it was
wonderful.
3 or 4 of them. And I'm like, "Let's go. That's perfect." So that was great. So I was down on the Gulf Coast, Fairhope, Alabama. Had never been there before. I had heard that it was the Austin of Alabama, I guess. I've never
Okay.
been to Austin. I can say that it had a lot of boutiques, like boutique businesses. It had
Hmm.
a lot of a tourist feel to it. I went to several places where they didn't seem like little fishing village, kind of what I was kind of expecting, quaint type of stuff. It did seem a little polished and little ready for tourists. But I got to say that Fairhope Brewing there is serving them well. It's a good brewery. It I never know what to expect from little towns like that.
Hmm.
Sometimes the hometown advantage inflates the ratings of a place, and I found that they were across the board making really solid beer, and enjoyed myself and wound up drinking their beer pretty much everywhere I went. So and I've got a few for the beers of the week coming up, but
Okay, perfect.
yeah,
What was your favorite beer out of Fairhope?
I but it's, I think it was the coffee stout. Now that I think about
Okay.
it, their IPA, the Take the Causeway IPA, was solid. It was a really good IPA. Wasn't It was West Coast. There's no haze to it. It had some nice bitterness to it. It took me like a second to recalibrate my brain to like, oh yeah, we're back. We're doing West Coast stuff. So
Yeah.
it was nice to have that. Their coffee stout was another one of those like 5.5%, good balance of coffee and malt. It was just really, it's a really good drinking stout. Uh, not a monster. You didn't feel crazy after you finished one. And I did while I was there just for the heck of it, because I it occurred to me that like this stout has nice balance to it. I'm like, why don't I take the one hazy IPA that they have and cuvee that with it and see if I can make a good coffee IPA out of it. I came up with a pretty decent ratio, and one of the bartenders there was like, "I'm going to try this too." So we both had a half and half, like hazy coffee hazy coffee IPA. So it worked out well. But I think their beer was good across the board. And in terms of small town beer, man, that's they nailed it. You know, that's exactly a good facility, everything. Nothing
Yeah.
bad to say about it at all. It
And you
was a
know
good
what's great
time.
about small town breweries is they usually try to play it safe, try to be more approachable to a lot of people. But you know who doesn't usually play it safe is Malort.
Oh
Now,
yeah,
Brian,
yes.
tell me, in all of your Boilermaker experiences, would you ever consider having a cicada infused Malort shot?
So my
And what
initial
beer would you pair it with?
Oh, jeez. So I happen to know. That's a really good question. I happen to. I read the article about it. I saw the picture with the cicada floating in the shot. There's no chance in heck I'm ever going to drink an actual shot with a bug in it. However, I did look into the story a little bit, and I saw that they I think they freeze the cicadas to kill them off, then they cook them to make sure they're safe, and then they put the bug into the Malort bottle so it infuses in there. And they said that had a flavor reminiscent of succulent lobster, which I don't believe at all, not even a little bit. But I'm gonna say with that, maybe like a Schwarzbier or something like that. I don't know. That just comes
Okay.
out to me as like an amber or a Schwarzbier. Maybe maybe like a blonde. I don't know if I'd want all the weirdness and the probable bitterness that's in there to fight with an IPA. I don't know. Maybe a
See, and
Black
you're
Tuesday, so I don't remember it. That might actually be a
see,
good
you're
call.
thinking too hard. I think I would just pair with like a tall boy of PBR or something.
Oh, that's a good idea. You know
I'm
what?
just thinking, Northern
Yeah,
Midwest
yeah,
beer with a Northern Midwest spirit company.
yeah. If they're Yeah, yeah. I think if you're drinking bugs, you might as well go like, as macro as it gets. You need
Maybe a
it.
Marble Red.
Yeah. What should that go in the Malort bottle too?
Oh, why not?
Infuse Malort with cigarettes and cicadas. Oh,
Mm.
That sounds amazing. No, it sounds terrible. Don't do it. This is not medical advice. Don't do that. Yeah. So you know why they're doing that, right? Like,
Well,
I,
because of the cicada bloom, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah. Have you seen any? I didn't know until I talked to some people that are up in Tennessee where I guess it's really bad.
Mm.
I didn't hear or see any down here, but I guess it's
So
huge in
yeah,
some
so
places.
around here it's not too terrible, but I went and visited some friends north of Atlanta, in between Atlanta and Chattanooga. There's a big in between town called Dalton, and I've got some friends that live over there, and it's awful. The drone is so loud. You think like there's a plane flying overhead or like a truck hurtling past you down the highway, but no, it's just bugs. It's just tens of thousands of bugs just screaming into the air,
Yeah.
and it's so bad. So yeah, they have an excess of cicadas to be able to infuse some Malort shots, apparently.
It's some sort of weird metaphor of life. They wake up, realize that this is all there is to life, and they scream until they die. So that seems appropriate. So you
I mean,
know that
that's
there's apparently two broods or whatever they call them that are like
hmm
hatching at the same time, like a 17-year, like they sleep for 17 years, I guess, and they're like a
yep.
14-year, and they're all just happen to be doing it at the same time. It's
How did we get
crazy.
so lucky?
I know. I can't even
So
imagine it.
now, Brian, I'm looking at it and I'm seeing that there is a dollar amount for one of these shots, but I want to ask you first, how much would you pay for a Malort shot, a cicada infused Malort shot?
I think you're asking me the wrong question. How much would I get paid to take one? I think that'd be more like it. And I'm figuring it's got to be a cool 20, just to start off with.
Just a clean $20?
Yeah, I want a crisp $20 bill. Nothing that's been in a pocket for any period of time. So, yeah.
See, the hard part for me is not that it's cicada infused. The hard part for me is that it's infused in Malort. Like, how much do I need to get paid to drink a shot of Malort? Don't even tell me about the cicada infusion. I probably won't even notice it.
That's a really good point. We are burying the lead here. You would be taking a shot of Malort, and that is
Yeah.
by far the worst part of the equation. You know what? The cicadas may actually taste like succulent lobster. You're never going to find out if you're having it with Malort. So
It might actually improve the flavor a little bit.
it might only if the cicada actually absorbs some of the flavor away from
Mm,
the Malort instead of the other way around. So that might, you know what? A little bit of charcoal and some cicadas, and we might wind up turning Malort into something that's almost palatable.
yeah.
I
So
think it
for
lose
those
all
of
the
you who
attraction.
it's for those of you who might be interested in drinking one of these cicada infused Malort shots, you can get one of your very own for five whole dollars up in Chicago. And
Yeah.
if you try it, let us know what it tastes like.
Well, you can do it for the price of a Malort bottle in most places where they have cicadas going wild. Just grab a cicada, kill it, fry it up or whatever, cook it so it's clean, and drop it in a bottle of Malort, and there you go. You go to town. You have an entire infused bottle. I did when I was reading about this. They said that they were probably only going to wind up. I think they had a good supply of food ready cicadas for this, but they figured that at most they were probably going to go through a couple of bottles because once you've had it the one time, I don't think you're ever going
Probably
back
not.
to that. So yeah, yeah, yeah. So yeah, you know what? Let's get into the beers of the week. I think that's the next good thing to get into. What are you drinking, Mo Mike Nate?
So in my glass right now, I've got a collaboration between Creature Comforts Brewing down here in Athens, really well known for their Tropicalia, and then it's a collaboration beer with Dancing Gnome Brewing, and this is their Community Connection, which is a New Zealand Pilsner. Light body, real easy drinking. I've been sipping on it so far throughout the show, and then I saw this over the weekend and really needed to get my hands on it from Prairie Artisan Ales. I've got America, y'all. It's a Nelson hopped IPA, and it's got just some really nice graphics here, reminding me of all the great things about America, like hot dogs and baseball, Mount Rushmore, um, an eagle with stars and stripes, aviator glasses on it, Uncle Sam, Statue of Liberty, all sorts of great iconography, American iconography, just to enjoy as my second beer for the show.
That reminds me, when I was down in Fairhope, I went. Well, actually, not Fair. It was an island a little ways away from Fairhope, but I went down there as a bird sanctuary. Went down to check it
Mm,
out. I saw what I believe was a bald eagle nest with eight actual bald eagle on top of it. It's a little
Oh.
distant, and my eyes aren't the best in the world, but it did appear to have the white head. So it could have been something like it, but it was a very elaborate, large nest, and it was good enough for me. It was like, yeah, America, you know.
Do you hear the Star Spangled Banner coming in over the wind?
Yeah, like being played on an electric guitar. Like it,
Oh, absolutely.
yeah, it was fantastic. Yeah. Oh, so I should get into what I'm drinking as well. So I pre-gamed with Three Taverns Pilsen Liberation, which is a collaboration with Pilsner Urquell's experimental brewery Electrona, and that's just a great pilsner. I've got nothing bad to say about it. I always look forward to that coming out, and I never drink. I never have enough of it. It always disappears too quickly. So I'm glad I made a trip down there to grab some from the brewery. And I, of course, and I'm into it now. The Smith and Lentz, and one of the pilsners that I picked up when I said, "Give me a 4 pack
Hmm.
of all of your pilsners," is their Quackenbruck German style pilsner. It is quite nice. It's like I said, German style pilsner with Saphir hops. So I'm very much in favor of that. I recommend trying that out if you happen to be by there. And of course, I did pick up a Fairhope Brewing. Take the Causeway IPA, and that will be what I end on. I debated because I did bring back the coffee stout, but I decided I was going to go IPA on this one. That way, when I'm done with the show, I'll be able to sleep tonight versus
There you go.
the coffee thing, which may keep me up. So that is it for the beers of the week. They're all really good. Recommend you go out and get those. And I do have one question about the community connection. I was going to ask Dancing Gnome. Do you know where they're out of?
Oh, you are telling me something that I should know. I don't
It's
know
not a
offhand.
yeah, no big deal if you didn't. That will be something I that comes up a little later, and I just happen to recognize it. I'm like, oh yeah,
It's
okay, so
Pittsburgh.
it's Pittsburgh. Okay, good.
Hmm.
And it's good. You enjoying that one?
Yeah, no, I really enjoy this one. I've seen Dancing Gnome beers here in Georgia uh, more more frequently recently, and I've really enjoyed the one or two that I've already had from them. So seeing Future Conference and them collabing on a Pilsner was something I just had to have.
Cool, cool, excellent. Look forward to trying that. So before we get into some headlines, I do have a little extracurricular pick, a little something that's kind of we have more interest than just beer. We get into tinned seafood and video games and cocktails and whatnot. As it turns out, my pick for this week, what I recommend everybody out there who has any interest in cocktails at all do is make yourself a little bottle of saline, and that is saline as in water and salt. And basically, it's a 20% ratio of salt to water. And the reason for that, beyond it being super easy to make, is that it has such a huge impact on the flavor and the body of a cocktail. It's like it's kind of like the difference between putting salt on some food and just not putting salt on it. It's kind
Yeah.
of that level of difference. So it's that for cocktails, and it doesn't make them taste salty because we're talking about adding like a drop or two of this to a cocktail, and it has a marvelous impact on it. In fact, another thing where I use salt, where you might not expect it, is occasionally I'll sprinkle some in my coffee grounds when I'm
Hmm.
brewing coffee. It will take the edge off some of the bitterness in the coffee, and you'll end up with a slightly sweeter coffee if you have one that you're not caring for too much in terms of just the edge that it's got. It can help with that a little bit. It's not a miracle cure, and you can go overboard with that. But yes, the saline, super easy to make. Definitely recommend it. Salt your coffee, experiment a little bit, see if it works for you. Go very light on it. So, do you have any thoughts on this, Nate? I think you've been doing this for much longer than I have. I just recently did it and thought, wow, this is incredible.
So you recently did it. So what cocktail did you recently add it to?
Let's see. Now you put me on the spot. I think the industry sour was one of the first ones
Okay.
I did because my wife's a big fan of it. I believe that's a mix of Fernet and chartreuse and is it lemon juice and
Think
simple syrup?
so. And Ango bitters.
Is I don't know if the
Oh, there's
one I
no. Okay.
yeah, I think it's just simple syrup and lemon juice, and I don't know if it's an equal part deal, but it's pretty close. It's very simple to make. It comes together really well. It has a very unique flavor, very enjoyable. Big fan of it in this house, and adding just a tiny bit of saline to it really brought it up a notch. So
Yeah. So I definitely have been using saline in cocktails for a while. I add them to just about everything. So I my favorite thing is just putting a couple drops, 2 or 3 drops into an old fashioned and seeing how that influences the flavor. It definitely helps, I think, round out some of the flavor and just make it be a better overall tasting drink. I mean, shoot, I don't like putting salt in my rims for my margaritas, but I do like putting salt in my margaritas. So sometimes I'll just salt bay a little pinch into my shaker tin. There you go. When I'm making margaritas, and so why not just drop a little saline solution and ensure that it's actually going to dissolve in with the rest of the cocktail.
Yeah, something else I might get into later is the whole freezer cocktail pre-making thing, and it
Hmm.
reminds me that for the margaritas I made for Cinco de Mayo, yeah, I was actually adding salt directly to the mix, pre-making it, so that was interesting. So in a way, I kind of added it to that without really thinking about it, but yeah, definitely something to check out. Try it out if you're messing around with cocktails and you think, hey, my stuff's fine at home, but why is it so much better out and about at a good cocktail bar or whatever? That in addition to having a lot of really fancy pants expensive stuff that they probably do have and pre-making a lot of stuff, they probably also are just adding a little bit of saline to it. So
Hmm.
yeah, it's the MSG for cocktails without all of the negative connotations. I shouldn't have said that. I'm sorry. I take it back. All right.
Good.
I think we should get into the cocktails. We should get into cocktails. We should get into headlines and then get into cocktails. So, our first story is one I want to just follow up on real quick. We talked about it earlier, and it's you may have heard that Wayne Wombles was unexpectedly laid off by Monster Beverage from his job as brewmaster at Cigar City Brewing. He held that position for 16 years and is responsible for all kinds of like all the stuff from Cigar City is
Hmm.
basically his doing. So very surprising, very unexpected, and we had no idea what on earth he was going to do next. A guy like that, you figure he's not going to be sitting around doing nothing for very long. So
No,
we
and
now,
especially the way that he got cut from the company, he still has a lot of years of passion and creativity in him. So he was going to pop up sooner rather than later.
yeah, and I wasn't even paying attention, but we found out this week exactly what he's going to do. So he moved pretty quick on this. He just purchased Upcountry Brewing in Brevard, North Carolina, and he plans to launch his new brand Griffin and Sphinx at the location. But he plans to also produce some of the existing Upcountry beers as well. It's going to be a small operation. He will be doing a self distribution model. In fact, he will be doing all of the brewing apparently, and all of the distribution, self distribution personally. So he'll be
Oh, wow.
brewing it and driving it around, I guess. But as for the previous owner, John Cochran, who formerly was at Terrapin, what was he doing next? He plans to retire, so we are unlikely to see him probably work in a very serious capacity. But you never know with somebody like that. He's been involved in a lot of breweries. Who knows? He may end up being involved in something sooner or later if he gets a little bit bored with everything. But he had
Well,
put
and
the brewery up for sale, I guess, at the end of last year. So
yeah.
he had been eyeing moving on, I think.
Well, and that's the thing too, is that we, especially with the craft and independent, everybody's got a number. If you get the right number slid across the table your way, there might be some real passionate people out there that say, no, I'll never sell. But any honest brewery owner, I think, would, if they got the right number, would be like, yes, it's time for me to sell. So him coming from Terrapin and then starting Upland and then being able to create a successful enough brewery that somebody else wants to come in and buy it out from you, I think that's a win. Go enjoy that retirement. Maybe you'll come back and start a smaller brewery or just do something else in alcohol. I don't know. Go start a
Yeah,
garden.
yeah, and at some point, I know when a lot of people start out, you don't think about retirement, getting older, but at some point, you're going to want to sell or close because you can't do it forever. At some
Hmm.
point, you need some relaxation time. And as I see somebody is commenting on Instagram, retirement is awesome. I don't know if I'll ever experience it myself, but I hear good things. So I can completely understand why somebody would retire. I think I would get bored, but I've not actually been able to retire and find out. I've had stints between jobs and I got a little antsy. I'm gonna say I got a
Yeah.
little antsy, but I'm still young enough that I would get antsy at something like that. So
Well, and the crazy thing about retirement is I used to manage a liquor store and would talk to all sorts of different kinds of customers. And I would have a couple of customers who had retired and I would ask them, hey, how are you enjoying retirement? They also said the same thing. I'm busier in retirement than I was when I was working. They're just packing their time doing things they want to do. So they're still being busy. They're not getting antsy. Volunteering, hanging out with family, traveling. Maybe it's just I'm sitting on the dock fishing, but they're just being real busy about it.
Yeah, if you're retired, you're not working for somebody else. You're working for yourself, and
Hmm.
we all know working for yourself means you have the worst boss ever. They doesn't give you a lot of time off. Expects a lot from you. So yeah, so good luck to them both. I know with self distribution, we're probably not going to see too much of Wayne's stuff down here, but I hope to get my hands on it occasionally, and hope John Cochran enjoys his retirement. So that'll be good. In sad news, we got some sad news this week. The Portland, Oregon beer scene and my former home, they lost a pioneer this week.
Hmm.
Art Larrance passed away at the age of 80. He was in 1985. He was the one of the founders of Portland Brewing Company, which was responsible for the legendary McTarnahan's Amber Ale, a beer that I drank a lot in the late 90s, and I was very much a fan of that. And that particular approach and style of amber was very much in my particular wheelhouse, my desire for it. I think it skewed a little bit more bitter than malty, so I like that a great deal. He also, in possibly even a bigger deal, co-founded the Oregon Brewers Festival in 1988, which is something that I went to several times and always really wanted to get back to, but never did. I guess it still technically exists, but it's kind of a little ancillary kind of event on a larger, is that the Rose Parade or something like that? I forget. It's been too many years, but that was a great time at that festival. That's where I learned that you could put hot chili peppers in beer because people did it and brought it there. I'm like,
Oh
I
wow.
never heard of such a thing. Also, I think my first ever watermelon beer was at this thing, and it blew my mind. I'm like, you can do this with beer? I had no idea you could do this. And we're talking like, I want to say like 99, maybe 2000, something like that in that era.
Okay.
So the concept of seasonal beers and interesting adjuncts was very, very much a new concept for me. So very formative for me. He wasn't directly involved in the blending and creation of Cascade Brewing beers, but he did found Raccoon Lodge Brew Pub in 1998, which was where Cascade came out of. So he let one of his brewers run with that, and he did
Hmm.
eventually sell Cascade Brewing in 2020. But yeah, he was the business mind behind Cascade Brewing back in those days, and a lot of respect for Cascade. That was I don't know if I'd call it whale, but it was like on the verge of being whale for me for a few years when we couldn't get it
Yeah.
out here. If I ever saw it anywhere, it was ever available. You just buy it without question. So I miss those
Well,
days
and
when that was a very big exciting thing because I do see it occasionally and
yeah,
occasionally still drink it, but yeah, yeah, man,
those
what a
those
time.
Cascade sours were definitely the enamel melters back in the day, though. You definitely felt like you were getting a true sour, like in your face sour ale. And I do like, I think it was around when they sold off that they had actually dropped the price a little bit on those sours because that 750 of that was like 22.99, 26.99. And back then, we're talking 2019, 2018. That was a lot of money to spend on a single bomber.
I want to say that some of them were up to $40, like
That's
some.
even wilder.
And I remember the crazy thing is the Cascade Barrel House. I had moved away from Portland by that time, but I'd gone back to visit. This is probably 2016 or something like that. I went in there around this time, and I was not convinced that sour beers were a good thing. And I went in there with a buddy of mine, and I drank through them, and I'm like, there were a few. I'm like, okay, this was interesting. My
Okay.
first time there was like, all right, that was an experience. Walked away without buying anything. The next time I went, that was probably before it's 16 because I think the last time I was back this was 16. When I went back in 16, I came away with a bunch of bottles and I drank all of their Sang Noirs and all the really
Hmm.
exciting ones, and I loaded it up. So a lot of difference over the course of a couple of years as I developed a taste for it. So, but anyway, yes, rest in peace, Art Lawrence. You will be missed. Thank you for your contribution to beer. Nothing in beer would be the same without you. So, yeah, it's sad to see a legend go away, but anyway, we have to move on. Going on to the next thing, we do have some interesting news about what yeast can do. Yeast can moonlight when they're not making beer. they can moonlight as recyclers, basically. So, according to a recent study in Frontiers in Bioengineering and Biotechnology, yeast left over from brewing can bind itself to electronic waste metals. And specifically, when beer yeast is added to a solution containing mixed metals, the yeast is able to isolate and take up specific metals. And take up was in quotes in the article, and I'm not scientifically minded enough to fully grasp what that is. I'm guessing that means it basically absorbs the compounds or does in some way processes them. And so the yeast can be used up 5 or more times to do this without losing its efficacy for isolating these compounds. So the implication is, after creating beer, the future of that yeast may have a second job as like breaking down discarded electronic gadgets, and there's tons of them. Like, we've got so much, just like cheap electronics that we get these days that work for a little bit and get thrown away. And so all that stuff is sitting in a landfill. So for this to all work out, it is going to require some investment and development on the part of electronic waste recyclers. But the abundance of this yeast, which is basically thrown away by the gallon or ton every
Mm-hmm.
year, means that they've got this thing that's basically free, and that could make the process more financially feasible. But they're going to have to break it down so the yeast can process it. So I like this idea. I also got the feeling when I was reading it that I don't know if we're going to get there. Maybe this will work out, but I'm wondering. It seems really hypothetical, and we're talking about yeast breaking up very small amounts. So
Yeah, it definitely seems hypothetical. And the other thing I gotta wonder is, how do you figure that out? Where, who had the idea of, okay, we're gonna just try a bunch of different organic ways to try and help reduce e-waste or help recycle e-waste? And how, I just, never in my wildest dream would I've ever thought, I'm gonna spray some spent beer yeast on some electronic strap and see what kind of effect it has. It does seem a little wild to me that they were able to find. I mean, it's cool, but it seemed a little wild to me that they were able to figure out that this was a potential viable solution.
I think it must have been inspired by knowing a little bit about how yeast function. I think that, like, we know that in some cases you need to add yeast nutrients, like at least as home
Hmm.
brewers, and certain elements in water chemistry are conducive to the yeast. I'm guessing it might have been a case of a home brewer or somebody that knew about the process realized it needed these certain compounds, and if you had a slurry, and that's effectively what they're doing, of these
Hmm.
compounds with a bunch of other refuse, it could isolate and extract those compounds. And they found, I think, that what they did to ensure demonstrate that the yeast had actually taken up these elements is, I think they actually took an acid bath
Mm.
broke them down, so it left all of the components or the elements there behind after the yeast had been dissolved. So yeah. So my guess is, like, just inspired by seeing what the yeast do just to reproduce and do their thing in beer, they realized, I think, zinc might be one of the things that they need. They're taking up zinc, so zinc is in them, and if they're taking up some other elements, uh, that's a way of kind of filtering things. So that'd be my guess. I don't know. These people are really smart. They probably know things about the inner workings of yeast that would blow our minds. So
Gotcha,
yeah,
gotcha.
that would be my guess. So it's really, yeah, it's kind of blows my mind. I hope that something like this happens. That somebody's willing to put down the money to make something like this, to do the development to see this happen, because we've heard about the ability of yeast to do a lot of really interesting things. You know,
Hmm.
um, I want to say they were able to make packaging or even like clothing with spent
Okay.
yeast. I believe it was yeast. It wasn't the grain. So we hear about a lot of these things, but I've yet to see any of them actually come to market. So I'm curious to see what, maybe we're a decade or two away from this happening, but it'd be really cool to see it happen. So hopefully it happens. But
Yeah, absolutely for sure. Hey, Brian, have you ever been to a Braves game, or have you been to a Braves game this season?
uh no, not this season. I was at the last season.
Gotcha. Well, I went to see the Braves battle the Nationals earlier this week, and I got a chance to go pop in with one of our wonderful sponsors, the Terrapin Brewery in Atlanta. and catch me a pint of the Los Bravos, which is just a really easy drinking lager. It was such a great day for baseball. The Braves ultimately won against the Nationals 2-0, and it was fantastic. But we just had our Craft Brewers Guild beer festival, and a lot of breweries in Georgia were doing collaborations with various other breweries around Georgia. And Terrapin actually has a collaboration beer with a variant on right now called Free Spirit Tribute Number 6, which is benefiting the Small Dreams Foundation. That's a 5% New Zealand style Pilsner. But if, a Los Bravos lager or a New Zealand Pilsner isn't your thing, they also have other Terrapin brewery favorites like the Higher and Hazier, which is a hazy double IPA. Keeping up with those baseball themed beers, they've got the Schwartz Stop, which is a Schwartz beer. And then in addition to that, they've got Bob's Your Dunkel. And while you're there grabbing some beer, why don't you stop in and get you some Foxborough's barbecue? That way you can fill up while you wet your whistle.
Yeah, yeah, and you get that thing where what was it, the green beans, where it's basically a big chunk of pork with one green bean in it. I think that's what it
Yeah,
was.
absolutely.
Yeah, you feel like you're eating vegetables, but you're really eating pork. And it's delicious. Yeah, that sounds like a great time. I love getting down there. I haven't been down in a minute, but I definitely go down more often for Terrapin Brewery Atlanta than I do for the Braves game. But yeah, I do like. It's like my favorite reason is to go down is for the Braves game. But yeah,
Hmm.
maybe like second or tied for second place is Terrapin Brewery Atlanta. So, but yeah, these things are great when they work out. But Memorial Day, as we were talking about earlier, has come and gone, and you know what that means, Nate?
What does that mean?
It's officially drinking season. And I
Oh,
can't think of a better place to drink in the season than your local truck and tap. But what are you going to have to drink? The beverage world is your oyster at Truck and Tap. They've got wine, spirits, cocktails, and of course 20 taps of delicious craft beer. Heck, they even have some bottles and cans of your favorite beers that are not on tap. So, but I know what you want to hear. You want to hear what my picks are for the week, of course. And yeah, here they are. Starting at the Woodstock location, my pick is Creature Comforts Community Connection on the side pull tap, which is what Mo Mike Nick is drinking right now. I'm going to get it side pull. Do you think it would be better on side pull, or do you think it's better out of the way you're having it now?
I think you will enjoy the experience a little bit better out of a side pull tap.
Okay, so that sounds that's perfect because that's the way I'm going to get it. So as you mentioned before, it's a New Zealand style pilsner brewed with the choicest of Motueka hops. I'm going tiki with my pick at Truck and Tap Alpharetta. My pick is Six Bridges Tiki. Don't lose that number. A fruited sour with lime, mango, coconut, and a great name. It's hard to pass up a good farmhouse ale, which is why my pick at Truck and Tap Duluth is Jester King's Queen's Order, a farmhouse ale with tallow, honey, and dried lemon peel. And finally, at Lawrenceville, my pick is Perennials Barrel Aged, Then You Roast the Mallow. The name is a mouthful, which is appropriate for a big boozy pastry stout that's like 13+% that's made with graham crackers, marshmallows, and cocoa nibs. So, but you know what? Don't forget that Father's Day is coming up quick. And you know what dad really wants? He wants good
Hmm.
food and good drinks. So that's exactly why Truck and Tap sells gift cards. Don't forget to take care of dear old dad on your next visit. And thank you once again to Truck and Tap for your support. And thank you to Terrapin Brewery Atlanta for your support. We love you guys both. So,
Absolutely.
yep, indeed. So moving on. We've got a fun one. We got to get into this, the early onset Oktoberfest rage, or yeah, anger, drama, whatever we want to call it. So they've announced in the news that they're planning on banning a hit song at this year's Oktoberfest. But don't worry, it's not the chicken dance song. But you might have heard it before. It's probably, I don't know if it's something you would ever hear at an Oktoberfest. Maybe they play songs like this in Munich. I don't know. I know they do have a very interesting playlist. Just anything that's popular and poppy. But the song is a dance track, a vintage dance track called L'amour toujours, and it's a
Mm.
French name or French. I don't know if I said it right, but you have to forgive me for that. As far as I can tell, it has nothing to do. The banning has nothing to do with the artist or the actual song. The song was released back in 2001, so it's nothing even current. The problem is Germany's extreme right seems to enjoy shouting their slogans in time to the music, and it's become a whole thing. I guess it's their version of like Peppy the Frog or something like that. Where I don't know exactly how that works. So it's to the point where the song has become inextricably tied to those slogans. So when people hear it, they don't hear a song from 2001. They hear these messages that these people that they don't care for have to say. Organizers of Oktoberfest are trying to keep the festival as non-political as possible, so they don't have time for any of that. So if you're looking for some vintage club tracks this year at Oktoberfest, you'd better stick with Darude Sandstorm to be safe.
There you go.
Yeah.
So when I saw this headline pop up in our feed, I was a little nervous because I didn't care about the chicken song. I cared about Country Roads, and I was really worried that Country Roads was the one that was going to get canceled.
I thought the same thing. I was like, "Oh no, is this a licensing thing? Maybe it gets canceled because of all these years it's been played illegally or something." I didn't know. But I also thought the same thing. I don't know, have any idea why, but um or oh, what's his name? Who did they love so much? The guy that ate the burger on the floor, Knight Rider. You know what I'm
Yeah,
talking about? They he got banned or something like that. That would be funny. One too many hamburgers eaten while laying on the floor. What is his name? Can you think of it?
I
I
have
can't.
no idea. I really
Ah,
don't. I don't know who you're talking about. I do remember
Hasselhoff,
the
the Hoff, of
David. Yeah,
course.
David. Yeah, don't
Yeah,
hassle the Hoff.
that's right. So he's safe. He's not banned. It's going to be cool. I just saw, I think on YouTube, I just saw a video. He did a cover of, oh, what's his name? You know what? I shouldn't bring up things where I have to remember names because it's a terrible idea. The Passenger, and it was done by Iggy Pop, I believe, or Iggy Pop in one of his bands. I don't remember. Man, it's tough. I won't bring up anything where I have to actually remember names because it's a really bad idea. Anyway, so moving on, we've got a. Did you hear about there being a strike at Molson Coors, Nate?
No, I didn't hear that there was a strike at Molson Coors.
I think I did, but I didn't see much chatter over it. It's interesting. So there was a going to be a strike. I think I believe 3 or 4 months ago at I want to say it's a Budweiser plant, and there was a lot of press about that, and it eventually they came to some sort of an agreement before it happened. But yeah, so this the Teamsters in the Molson Coors facility in Fort Worth, Texas, they've been striking for 3 months, and
Wow.
yet like I just never heard anybody talking about it really. But anyway, it's now officially over. They voted to ratify a 3-year contract with Molson Coors, which secures them some higher wages, some additional benefits, addresses some healthcare related issues that they had, and it's good for 420 workers. I'm going to say that part of the reason we haven't heard anything about this is there wasn't a lot of disruption in their supply because Molson Coors had a contingency plan in place, which I found interesting. I don't quite understand how this works. They had a plan that allowed them to keep brewing, packaging, and delivering beer using quote unquote current employees, which I thought was weird. I'm like, wait, aren't your current employees the people who are striking? So I don't.
Yeah.
I wonder if that means that people in management who weren't part of the union were actually doing non-management jobs or something like that. Because that's all I
Maybe. I
could
mean,
figure.
the other thing that it could be too is that they just upped production in surrounding plants to that one plant that was on strike and
That's a
shipped the
good point.
difference to the affected area. Because current employees implies that, well, you would be using the employees that are on strike, like you said. And so if because current is the specific word here. And so if I mean, does that mean that they thought they would fire them all and then have future employees? I don't know.
Because it never said anything in the article about like scabs, which is usually the word you hear.
Hmm.
I don't know a lot about unions. I know what I've seen in the news previously. So I thought that was interesting. But yeah, it apparently had very little impact. They were looking at the financials. I think the chief financial officer was speaking about it, and like it would be a blip. It won't even be a thing. It's like that's crazy. But you know, when you're operating at that level at Molson Coors, maybe you can take this hit, and maybe it worked out for them. Making these guys go for 3 months, they might have been more, accepting of an alternate offer. But
Yeah, well, the other thing that's really impressive about it too, and maybe it's just because it was just off my radar, but I do a weekly search for craft beer news, and I would have thought that something like this would have popped up and been more prominent in. Granted, I know that Molson Coors is not qualified as craft beer, but I do craft beer news and then I do beer news, and never have I seen any blip on my searches for news articles. So not only do they keep production up, but seemingly they lock down the media response to their strike. So
It may have also been because Budweiser had taken such a hit. Maybe the fact that they might have had on top of all of the scandal of the last year, all of the stuff
Mhm.
happening, they had the possibility of a strike happening, which looked even more devastating. That might have been what gave that more press. But yeah, maybe we're just really bad at doing our research for the show. I mean, it could also be that. I feel like this should have been something we saw somewhere and we didn't. But I don't know. I guess it wasn't a big deal financially, so nobody really wanted to talk about it. But yeah, good for everybody involved. I'm glad the workers got some additional pay, some additional benefits. Hopefully, they don't have to strike again in 3 years when they go back to the table to negotiate, which I assume is
Yeah,
what's going to
good for them.
happen. Yeah. Some interesting and some bad news. Lagunitas is shutting down in Chicago. So they're currently owned by Heineken, and they're pulling a plug on their brewery slash tap room in Chicago. The tap room, as of just actually a few days before we're even recording this, is completely permanently closed at this point. But the brewery is going to keep running until early August. As to why they're closing, the official word is shifting all the production back to the original California location will make them more efficient and future proof the brewery in light of the way things are going in beer these days. It will also allow them to focus on more innovation and sustainable brewing practices. So that's having everything under one roof at the Petaluma, I believe, is a city in California. That facility there. Unofficially, I've heard rumors that Lagunitas was never really embraced by Chicago. It's wouldn't be terribly surprising. They're a brewery from California, and they're now owned by beer behemoth Heineken, who some people are still kind of annoyed at for their the way they behaved during the beginning of the Ukraine war, where everybody's pulling out, and I think that they didn't. So I know that I remember disliking that. So that could be part of the reason that they weren't getting a lot of love there. But and then there's just the sense that they're probably not selling enough beer in the Chicago area and on the Eastern Seaboard to justify having the second location. It just doesn't make financial sense, which may be exactly what they're saying. That said, Lagunitas products will still continue to be available in the Chicago market. They say that that market is very important to their business, and they definitely want a place there, even if they don't have a facility there. 86 people will be affected by the closure, though some of them will be able to work remotely, and some of them will also be transferring to California. So good luck to those folks. Hope things work out for them. It's a tough time, but there are still breweries opening. We do have closures, but we do still have
Mhm.
openings. There even in light of everything we've heard, the I think the openings are still slightly outpacing or on par with the closures. So there's still opportunity out there. It's a little tougher now than it has been.
Yeah,
So
I think I mean, definitely the openings that I've heard of so far this year have been only Georgia based. I don't hear any big openings outside of Georgia, but it seems to be a little bit more smaller focused. It's your local town that's getting its first brewery ever, or it's a medium-sized town getting like a second brewery. But logging is closing and being cited for future-proofing the brewery, I think that's a pretty clear indicator about where some of these mid to large size breweries are seeing trends in the market and are just, they'd rather retract than go away. I remember back when Green Flash um, had a tap room in Richmond, Virginia, and they're a West Coast brewery, and they had opened an East Coast facility to get a better footprint. And this was at least 10 years ago when they closed the Richmond, Virginia location,
it's been a while, yeah.
and even after they contracted, they still filed for bankruptcy, and they're back now. Tilray Brands owns them, and so they're back and distributing beer under the Tilray umbrella. But it's a really tough market right now to be in the beer industry. You're fighting an ever shrinking piece of the pie as far as alcohol consumption, and you've got Gen Z who they're saying no to alcohol, but they're also saying no to carbonation. So it's
Yeah,
just
the
it's getting
carbonation thing. Yeah.
yeah, it's getting harder and harder to be able to market, your product against somebody else who makes reasonably something very similar to what you already make.
Yeah, it's tough. I think that people are still finding some growth out there. I don't want to end up sounding too doom and gloom on this. There's still the opportunity for growth. I think people have to pivot to a different what the younger generations are looking for, which is more of an experiential thing and offering
Mhm.
more options. I think that
Yes.
the people that are anti-carbonation or scared away by how rough carbonation is may find that they kind of it's a maybe an acquired taste that they develop later on, or maybe they always go for lighter. Maybe they'll find cask ales that they like, or maybe they'll always be drinking the FMBs that also will be produced by many of these breweries as a side product. So you have to offer more things and you have to offer more experiences. I think there's still a lot to be had that way. And mentioning that, I thought it was interesting that Wayne Wombles was expected him to open up a brewery or get involved in something like that, but I also thought is now the right time to start one. But then I looked at it. He's going small. He's all of
Mhm.
the stuff. He's handling everything. He's keeping the costs down. Selling it directly out of the tap room and doing limited self distribution is, I think, currently the way to make a go of it.
Yeah.
Distribution ain't where it's at anymore, as a lot of these big folks are seeing. So,
Yeah,
um,
no, he's definitely moving in the right direction with that self distribution route. He's able to, by handling things himself, he's able to keep that overhead for labor costs down. And he's moving into a state that already has self-distribution. Earlier this year, Georgia put up a bill to vote for self-distribution, and unfortunately got struck down. But that can make or break one of these small town breweries who don't want to shack up with a distributor and deal with a lot of, the cost of selling their product to the distributor and the distributor selling it to the venue that's located across the street or on the other side of the same town they're in. If they were able to self-distribute and just throw it in the a pickup truck or a little transit panel van and just be able to hit all of their local market, it would it would really help make some of these smaller breweries more successful and stick around for longer.
Yeah, as a small brewery, you are a blip in the portfolio of a distributor. They're not interested in growing your
No.
brand. They never will. They're not going to spend a lot of time on it. You don't make them enough money to be a priority. So, like getting something delivered across the street is never going to be something that happens quickly, because you're not a priority. They have people that make them a lot of money. They will take care of your stuff eventually. So, yeah, that's just unfortunately where we're at. So.
Yeah, and you talking about how some of these younger kids are looking for the low alcohol or the FMBs or the no carbonation stuff. I've got some friends that are allergic to hops. They can't even have beer. And so when we talk about where we're going to go, when I'm with them, I never go to a brewery. But if a brewery offered cider or they offered wine, if they're able to offer more alcoholic options and the brewery can be like a beverage destination instead of, oh, I'm just going here for beer, I think that's another way. If you diversify what your offerings are, you're going to be able to pull in a wider range of customers. Or if you get that married couple that the wife doesn't really care about beer, but the husband does, well, if you're offering wine coolers or maybe some sort of alcoholic slushy, the wife can get that, husband can get his beer, or vice versa. Who knows? Maybe husbands nowadays are more into the wine coolers and slushies, and the wife is more into the big boozy
I've
stouts
known
and
some
IPAs.
dynamics like that. Yeah, I was going to say, or vice versa, because that's
Yeah.
a very real possibility these days. But did you ever get into that Prairie Artisan, or is that going to be an
Oh,
after the
I'm
show
drinking it right
thing?
now. No,
Oh,
it's
how is that?
uh, it's Star Spangled Awesome is what it is.
Star Spangled Awesome. All right, I'm going to have to get some. I'm going to get some Great Aviator shades. I'm going to drink that, put a bandana on, and just play a sweet guitar riff.
There you go.
Anything else we miss you want to mention or
No, it was a great week for beer. Good long weekends. Got into some tasty treats, mostly just pilsners. It was kind of hot here in Georgia, so getting into the homebrew that I had, and then drinking a couple of pilsners over the weekend.
Yeah, sounds great. I look forward to doing that again. I personally have another short weekend coming up, so I am going to
Hey,
indulge in. I have a lot of Pilsner for once. I'm usually almost all out, but all the traveling I've accumulated the Pilsner, but I haven't had a chance to drink much of it. So this coming weekend is going to be heavy on the lagers. It's going to be great. But well, I think that about covers it. We are going to be ending the show here, but we do have folks that join us later after the show. A little chat with the Patreon people. So if you're interested in that, you should definitely check out our Patreon page. I forget what it is. Patreon.com/beer guys, I think is what it is.
I think so.
I haven't said it in a while, so it's been a minute. But yeah, so that about wraps it up for this episode of the Beer Guys Radio Show. As always, have a great week, and don't forget to drink local. Cheers. And that's a wrap. Sweet.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us this week, you
Yeah.
guys, on the stream. Always a pleasure to always a pleasure to talk beer and have you guys sit in and watch us.
You get a little the carbonation happening when you're trying to close out there. I
A little
love that.
bit.
I had it happen a few times. I'm like, oh, all right, yeah. I think we're gonna close it out. We're gonna go talk to our Patreon folks, and I'm gonna get into that beer that I haven't gotten into yet because I've been too busy running my mouth. But appreciate it, and we'll talk to you next week about the same time and same place.
Cheers.